Right, this is the regular meeting of the Shafter Planning Commission dated Tuesday, February 13th, 2024. Tonight, I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Commissioner Fizer. Please stand. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please bow our heads. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the city of Shafter. Help us make decisions that are right and just. Please look out for our girls' basketball team as they go into playoffs. Keep them healthy, and let's push to help them get that W. In your name we pray.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Take any help you can get.
Yeah. I said keep them healthy.
Tonight, all chairmans are present with the absence of Commissioner Joe Shawn. We'll move on to approval of the agenda from the last meeting's minutes of January 9th, 2024.
I move we approve the minutes.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Kaiser, Wiebe,
Aye.
and Sanchez.
Aye. This next section of the meeting is for open public comment. Open public comment at this time. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wanting to address the commission only on matters not listed on this agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes unless additional time is needed for translation. Please state your name and address for the record before making your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, but yeah. Can I get approval? Yeah, approval of the agenda for tonight.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Kaiser,
Aye.
Wiebe,
Aye.
and Sanchez.
Aye. Sorry about that. Went right past it. Now I'll open this portion for public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wanting to address the commission only on matters not listed on this agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes unless additional time is needed for translation. Please state your name and address for the record before making your presentation. Anyone in the audience wishing to comment? Anyone on Zoom or? All right, seeing no one in the audience wishing to comment or on Zoom, we'll close public comment at this time and move on to the public hearing and open the hearing. Ask staff to present item number 1.
Yes, Honorable Commission. Tonight's one agenda item is the housing element update. So let's begin. So as you know, the housing element update is something that's required by Government Code Section 65580 at sequence. It is a document that ensures that adequate planning occurs for housing demand within the city. About 2 years ago, it began with the development of the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which is a set of numbers of houses at various income levels that have to be planned in the housing element to ensure that we have adequate housing to fit our needs. The current Council of Governments is the one that came up with the numbers for the RHNA, and then there was some back and forth between the municipalities, and ultimately it is finalized, and that becomes your numbers, your target numbers that you have to plan for over an 8-year cycle to accommodate housing of all income groups. The deadline for the housing element update adoption was January 1st of this year. However, there is by law a 120-day grace period. If you meet the 120-day grace period, there are no ramifications. If you were to not meet the 120-day grace period, certain triggers occur. One of the most notable ones being the rezoning that has to occur to accommodate more dense housing in our city limits would go from having that occur within 3 years to 1 year. And there would also be, if you didn't have an adopted housing element within that 120 days, some of your grant funding may be at risk. You may get a nasty grant from the state attorney general, things of that nature. So we're currently at about 60 to 80 days out, so we have plenty of time. If this is to be recommended for approval tonight, it would go to the city council on March 5th, within plenty of time for us to be able to hopefully get that approved by the city council and then turned into HCD so that we meet that 120-day grace period. There was a big part of the housing element update is community outreach. And community outreach occurred at various times between October of 2023 through April of 2023. And then the actual development of the draft housing element occurred in October of 2022 through May of 2023. The housing element, which is part of your package, is organized into 5 chapters with 3 appendices, and you can take a look at that in Exhibit 1. I also want to note that I provided you also a memorandum that I would like you to take home as well, and that basically tells you between getting the draft housing element out, these were the changes a summary of the changes that occurred to the housing element as a result of conversations and formal written letters that we had with HCD. In total, there were 3 letters that they provided us, a letter in August and then a letter in December saying that our housing element was still not compliant with housing element law. And so we continue to work to make revisions to appease HCD while at the same time protecting local land use control to the greatest extent possible. And then ultimately on January 26th, which is in your memorandum and why it's not part of the staff report, because I had to turn the staff report in before then, we got the final letter that you want to get from HCD, which essentially says that you are in substantial compliance with state housing element law. And that occurred on January 26th. So that's the last pages of your the memorandum I've provided you today. Okay. Can you bring it forward there? This one's not working for some reason for me. Thank you. Just to give you a sense of what the HCD review was like. The state grants HCD with the authority to review and assess compliance with state law in regards to the housing element. HCD determines compliance with law and makes the city eligible for state grant funds, things of that nature. On 5/16 of last year, the city submitted a draft housing element to HCD. Within the 90-day window in August 14th, HCD provided us with a findings letter number 1 that required substantial revisions. Between October, we then revised the housing element based on the first letter, and then we recirculated per state law for 7 days in October that revised draft housing element. We also continued to have face-to-face meetings with HCD to make sure that we were getting closer and closer to being substantially compliant with state law. So in November and December, we had about 6 meetings, Zoom meetings with HCD for about an hour apiece, going over various parts of the comments they had and crafting language until they felt comfortable with the language that we had provided. On 12/18, HCD provided us another incomplete letter, number 2, that required additional revisions. For the letter number 1, the biggest revision they wanted us was to sort of nail down the number of acreage we would have to rezone to a much denser with much denser units, at least 20 units per acre. That was kind of the big big requirement for letter number one. Letter number two came down more to sort of new law, like needing to have like off-the-shelf ADUs available, things of that nature. And the memorandum itself kind of tells you about all of the changes that occurred as a result of these back and forths with HCD between letter number one and letter number two. In January of this year, we circulated a third revised draft, which became our final revised draft because on January 26th, after reviewing that third revised draft, HCD issued us a letter stating that we were in substantial compliance with state law. And with that, the recommendation to the Planning Commission is to conduct a hearing and adopt resolution number 24-434, which recommends approval to the City Council of a general plan amendment to, one, repeal the old housing element, the 2015 to 2022 Shafter housing element, to adopt the new 2023 to 2031 housing element, and to adopt the mitigated negative declaration in compliance with SECA. And with that, I can take any questions that you guys may have.
I'll start, I guess. When you talk about rezoning 187 acres, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then you were talking about the 20 units per acre.
Correct.
Is that like, I mean, can you go less than that
No, it would have to be a minimum of 20 units per acre.
across the whole 187 acres?
Yes, it doesn't have to be all one parcel of the
Right,
100,
right,
but yes.
right, got it,
But
yeah.
when you're rezoning,
Yeah.
at first we were negotiating that we already have a zone like that,
Mhm.
which our R3 has a maximum of 24 units per acre. They said, no, but you've got to have a lower limit. And so there will be a need to rezone to at least 20 units per acre. Luckily, coming up here, we're going to have a general plan update where we're going to be taking a look at, how our city is going to develop over the next 20, 30-year horizon. And part of that will be a land use element where we can redefine what our various land use designations are. But one of those things that is going to be required is that one of those higher end, more dense residential designations is going to have to be at least 20 units per acre.
Okay, so the 187 acres, how many of that would be new acres that are not zoned right now currently?
How many would be new acres?
I mean, they were zoned R1, and I know there's no R1 anymore, but you were talking about speaking with the property owners
Mhm.
about, okay, so those are existing R3 zoned areas, or,
No.
because we don't have that much.
No, we
Yeah.
don't. We don't have very much R3 at all. And in fact, there was if you look in the housing element itself, there's a sites inventory with a map. It's
Yeah.
one of the appendices.
Okay,
And that's the area where we're going to focus in on and try to get 187 acres of at least 20 units per acre.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, it's got to be, and the big thing is it's got to be willing developer to do something like that.
right,
And so part of the general plan update, which luckily we got this 3-year window if this is approved to upzone.
mhm,
We'll have time to develop, to form what's called a general plan advisory committee. And with that will be some of the largest landowners. And that's when we'll sort of ask, hey, who would like to upzone to 20 units per acre?
Yeah.
And then that would be the opportunity to then sort of pick out parcels that we can do that for to meet that 187 unit requirement.
And when was the homeless count done? Was it the previous homeless count, or has there been a new one?
I don't remember quite offhand, but what I do know is that there wasn't very many homeless that were,
Yeah.
It was the most current that we had available at the time. Now, whether there's been another one since then, I don't know.
Yeah, the first time we did one of these, there were no homeless people.
Yeah.
And they kicked it back and said, no, you have to have homeless people. So we added some in the next time.
Yes, you brought some in. Yeah, no, I mean, homelessness has not been a problem, thankfully for us at this point in time. I think it's just because of sort of our isolation with respect to the larger area to the south, Bakersfield. It's the core is kind of on an island of its own. And but I mean, there definitely there are a few homeless that are around, but it's not at the level
Okay.
like a Bakersfield.
And then I haven't read through this, but when you're talking about the 20 units per acre, how's that going to impact the schools in town?
How's that going to
The-
impact
the schools?
Well, I mean, the schools always ask us about, what do I think
Yeah.
our unit counts are, and then
Right.
they accommodate based on that. And plus, I mean, every new development has to pay school impact fees with the idea that,
Right.
to accommodate the children that are going to be living in those areas as they develop. So that's pretty well established, the school impact fee program and basing it on number of projected units, things of that nature.
So Steve, first of all, it looks like you put a lot of work into it, but from my understanding, reading through and what we were talking about earlier, it's kind of to get by, and then until we get to do the general plan.
Well, no, the housing element is, we wouldn't redo the housing element for another 8 years. It is a fairly. This is going to be the rules of the road for developing housing here in the city over the next 8
It's
years.
gonna be incorporated into the general plan.
Right. It is, the housing element is one element of the general plan. The general plan has numerous elements, some required by statute, some that could be optional, like you could have an economic development element if you wanted one, but it's not required. But there's the land use element, the circulation element, how are you going to plan and develop roads within your jurisdiction, in this case, a city. Those are required elements. The housing element is required, just like the rest. But the big difference between the housing element and the rest of the elements of the general plan is the housing element is under the purview and approval process of HCD, the state Housing and Community Development Department. And that's why we had so much back and forth with HCD, and we had to get the substantial compliance letter, because they have final say on, you've done a good enough job. We agree, we'll accept it. And then if you decide to recommend approval of the city council, let's say the city council approves, I then submit it to HCD, and that becomes our official housing element for the next 8 years.
Understood. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Yeah, I know it's a lot. It's a lot, guys.
Just glancing at it.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much work goes into that document. I mean, it's 625 pages, so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought and a lot of laws that have to be followed, so.
Absolutely,
takes a little while
absolutely.
To go through it.
And then that's every city in the state,
And county.
county. And,
Yep.
And it all goes to this office.
Correct. It all goes through HCD.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough, and I would say something about, HCD was actually pretty decent to work with. We got to work with Paul McDougall, I believe it is, if I remember correctly, who's kind of the head of HCD. So the beauty of that was, if he said it was okay, it wasn't like it was sort of a junior staffer saying it was okay, and then it got overridden by a more senior staff. He's as senior as it gets when it comes to this. And so he was very instrumental in helping with the back and forth and sort of crafting language that made sense for us, and at the same time would comply with state housing law.
You were talking about your back and forth, and you had a time limit to have things turned in by. When you gave it to them, did they have a time limit to get their revisions back? Or-
They did. They had pretty, if I remember correctly, they had 30 or 60 days per, but they actually got us stuff quicker than that.
That's good.
I think they saw the sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. Like I said, I believe Shafter, out of all of the municipalities in Kern County, is the quickest to get to this point, where I don't know if anyone else yet, at least the last time I've checked, I don't believe anyone else has gotten a substantial compliance letter. Now, I could be wrong now, but last time I checked, we were very close to getting one, and then we got one. I think we may be the first to get one here in Kern County. So it's to say we're now we're now pushing 60 days into that 120-day grace. There's going to be a lot of scrambling in a lot of municipalities to try to meet that 120-day requirement. And I don't know what the ramifications would be, or if there's an ability to extend or what, but
You don't want
I didn't want to find out. Yeah.
That's it for me.
You said the next general plan, when we have to develop a new general plan is coming up when?
Well, you don't have to, you don't, there's not like a statutory requirement that you have to do this. There was a requirement that we get a housing element done by January of this year with a 120-day grace. That's not necessarily the case with the general plan update, but our general plan was developed back in 2005. So we're pushing 20 years. We also have a lot of our CEQA, we hang our CEQA hat a lot on the EIR for that general plan update, and it's now a 20-year-old document. So I think it's time to rethink, the vision of 2005 Shafter is different than the vision of a 2025 Shafter. So I think it's time now to reopen that up and figure out where we would like to go for the next 20 to 30 years with the city and be able to then plan that. Last year we introduced that to both the Planning Commission and the council. Council said go forth with trying to solicit proposals. So that's what we've done. And in fact, on March 5th, February 20th, next week, I'm going to be bringing just an informational item to the council at the 5 o'clock special meeting, kind of talking about where we are in the general plan update process, what are the next steps, and give the council some time to sort of digest that before they would have to make a decision about approving a professional services contract for the consultant that has been chosen.
Any other comments, questions? None from the commissioners. Will open the hearing for public comment at this time. Anyone in the audience or on Zoom wishing to comment? No, seeing no one, will close the section for public comment. I'll entertain a motion regarding item number 1.
I make a, excuse me, I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 24-434, recommending approval to the city council of a general plan amendment to repeal the 2015 through 2022 Shafter housing element, adopt the 23 through 2031 Shafter housing element, and adopt mitigated negative declaration.
I second that motion.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Heiser,
Aye.
Wiebe,
Aye.
and Sanchez.
Aye. We'll close the public hearing at this time and move on for any reports from commissioners. Girls basketball is tomorrow.
Playoff Wednesday. Finally got what they needed. Division 3, they've always been put in Division 2. They appealed at the CIF, got it, so now see what happens.
Any reports, comments, anything to adjourn?
I'll make a motion. We adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.
And just inform